Rugged Life, practical camping and full driving videos. That's the sort of content that I love creating in this channel. So in this video, I will share with you a few of my experiences on the road, and we'll obviously learn from those experiences. So whether you're an overlander or a camper or a weekend warrior, at some point you'll find yourself driving on paved roads, long distances, a highway driving, long distance driving. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of insight of what I do, so this whole video will make sense to you. So I do interstate transport here in Australia. I go all around the place, not just the big cities, but I go to remote areas, mining towns and that sort of places. Each and every pin on the map that you see are places that I know I can spend the night on. These are not motels or hotels, these are truck stops or rest areas along the side of the road. On average, I drive about 1,000 kilometers a day, 7 to 8 days at a time. I figured in the last 17 months I've driven roughly about 270 to 280,000 kilometers. So to put that into perspective, a full loop around the earth is only about 42,000 or something like that, I think. So do a lot of driving. I do a lot of towing. Every trip that I do, I always tow something, normally a car trailer. I've done boats, caravans, and random bits and pieces as well. So the first thing I'm going to share with you is planning, all right? And only a few things in here, quite important. When I say planning, what I mean by that is you got to know your driving limits and you got to be realistic with it, okay? So if you ask me, how long will it take you to drive from point A to point B? I can say to you, you can do it in one day. It will take you 12 to 14 hours to do, all right? And that's just because that's me. That might not be the case for you. You might need to stop every 2 hours, every 5 hours, which means that the whole trip will take you overnight to do, okay? Now, not only for yourself, you got to think about the people that you travel with as well, your partner, your friends, your kids, most especially, because they will probably have different tolerance to you in terms of sitting in the car for hours and hours on end. So you got to take that into consideration. Basing on that, then you can plan when you're going to stop, how often you're going to stop, and the best thing about that is the more you plan, the less risk or the less likely you will be in an accident or a bad situation. Now, a lot of accidents are caused by people who drive tired or they rush because they've got a deadline to meet. And good planning avoids those sorts of situations. Fatigue management. Okay, listen to this. There is no replacement for rest, and our bodies are designed to tell us when it's time to go to bed or when it's time for break. You can fight it. You can fight it up to a certain extent. Coffee, sugar, energy drinks, and that sort of thing. But once you take those sorts of food and it hits its peak, you'll feel tired again, and it will drop, and you'll feel fatigued again. So you got to know when to take a break. If you planned ahead, if you planned properly, then you should not be experiencing that sort of situation. As soon as you feel tired, if you've got cruise control on, turn off cruise control. Don't use cruise control. Short breaks makes a huge difference. So whether 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or even just a few minutes, hop off your vehicle, stand up, walk around, stretch, do whatever, okay? It makes a huge difference. You'll be surprised. Now, on that topic, what I normally do every time I hop off my vehicle, whether for fuel, to refill for fuel, or just for a break or whatever, I always check it. All right, look at your tires, just have a general look. But what I normally do is I look at my tires and I touch it. If the tires feel hot, like really hot, then something's wrong, and most likely, for whatever reason, the tire pressures went down, so less air in the tire, thus creating more heat because there's more friction between the tire and the road, so it created more heat. And a lot of tire blowouts are caused by overheating tires. That's why they explode. So I do that, and I touch the center of the wheel, like the hub area. If the hub is hot, like really hot, then either your brakes are sticking, which you should be able to smell, or your wheel bearings are on the way out, okay? and I just have a general look. Even sometimes a sniff under your vehicle will tell you whether something's wrong or not. Okay, I'll give you an example. I was rushing to this customer's place, nighttime. I pulled up in front of their house, pitch black, there was no lights in the street. I hopped off and I smelled something funny, like a gas leak. And I was sniffing all around under the truck, and I traced it back to the trailer. And when I looked at I've got a tandem cab trailer, so 2 axles. When I looked at the back wheel of the trailer, one wheel was way off. It was way off compared to the one in front. And long story short, basically the safety pin that holds the nut that holds the wheel bearing in managed to fall off. So the nut undone itself, the wheel bearing came loose, the wheel shredded the wheel bearing, thus the wheel was in the verge of flying off. I was so lucky. When I pulled over, the wheel was probably about less than an inch or about an inch away from flying. So had I driven probably another 50 meters out, it would have flown. I'll share with you a couple of things that I've got in my vehicle. Now, this thing is an exercise ball. There's a smaller version of this ball. I'd probably prefer the smaller version, to be honest with you, but what I do is, as soon as I feel some soreness in my back, as soon as I feel tired, I shove this on my back while I'm driving, and then just basically press against where the pain is, and it does make a huge difference just to alleviate that pain. It's really nice, really good. I highly recommend you get one of these when you're driving long distances. Now the other thing is, you got to be a bit creative, you see. Now this is a bungee cord, right? Just your normal bungee cord. So I've used it as kind of like a clothesline for my towel, just your normal, use your normal towel. And not only does it act as a curtain to block the sun out, but it also acts like as a clothesline to dry my wet towel. So with this one, I don't use it driving around cities. I only use this when driving on wide open roads. The other thing is this piece of kit. All right, it's a sleeve. It's a UV sleeve or a sun sleeve, or I just forget the exact term. But if you go to eBay, this is where I bought it from, and maybe you just search for UV sleeve or sun sleeve or something. It's a sleeve that you just put on like this. All right, and it protects you from the sun, and it's awesome. I use it all the time. Now, a few things that I do, and this stuck with me from the day I started driving. Okay, I always look at my gauges. I always just have a habit of constantly glancing on the dash, and it saved me lots of times. It saved me. Like, I give an example. I was driving up a hill, and the temperature gauge started to creep up. I was starting to overheat, and I managed to catch it super early that it hasn't even overheated yet. It was still in the process of overheating, and I saw the gauge, and immediately I stopped, pulled over, and I found that one of the driving belts that drives the water pump came loose, hence my temperature went up. Had I not been looking at my gauge that often, my vehicle would have overheated, and there was a chance that I would have damaged something, either blew a hose or blew a gasket or something. So I caught it early, I prevented that from happening. On the topic of overheating, I'll teach you a tip. When you're in a situation where your vehicle will start to overheat, or your temperatures are a bit higher than normal because you're driving on the sand or whatever you're doing, turn on your heater, blast your heater on high, just open the windows so you won't suffocate. What that does is, you know the hot water that circulates your cooling system that cools the engine, goes into your radiator. Basically, when you turn on the heater, there's this thing called a heater core. All right, it's kind of like a mini radiator, if you want to call it that way. When you open it up, the hot water then overflows into this heater core, and then the hot air from that heater core then gets thrown into your cabin. That's why you got the heater. So what you've essentially done is, by opening the heater core, you've kind of expanded the size of your cooling system, because you now have that hot water overflowing to another area where it could expel the heat out. Driving on the wet. I can share with you a couple of things with this. You probably know what hydroplaning is. So if you got a thin layer of water on the surface of the road. You drive over it at high speed, your car starts to float, and then you lose control. If it's raining, don't use cruise control, okay? Because when your vehicle starts to hydroplane, you got cruise control on, there's a possibility that the vehicle will then detect the speed wrong. It will give power on the wheels, and you can spin. You can slide. The other thing is, when you drive on a wet surface, and then if there are vehicles who's driven, before you see these two tire tracks, right? Those tire tracks is the area on the road with the least amount of water, because they've already driven through it, making it the area on the road that's got the most amount of traction. Assuming it's safe, and obviously just use your common sense as much as possible. If you can follow those tracks, just to give you the most traction. Now I'll share with you a very practical, very good tip. Okay, listen to this. You cannot change the situation, but you can change the outcome. Now, I had some experiences wherein I was caught in a bushfire, so that delayed me massively. I was caught in a sandstorm. This was really good experience, actually. It's amazing, this sandstorm. But again, you cannot change the situation, but you can change the outcome. The amount of times that I've managed to get myself out of trouble, do bush mechanic repairs just to be able to get out of where I am, really appreciate the fact that I know how to fix my vehicle. You got to be creative as well. Okay, now I'll share with you an experience I had, and I want you to know that I am not encouraging you to do this unless you're in a dire situation. So meaning, if you're in a remote area with no help around you, and rescue is far in between, then only then can you consider doing these sorts of things. All right, I'll give an example. I snapped one of the axles in my car trailer. I was in a situation where I had to do some sort of bush mechanic to get me out of this situation, and get to where the help is. So this is a trick for you too, by the way. If you're driving a tandem axle trailer, if you do snap an axle or one wheel, you can actually drive in tripod mode, assuming you got the right tools to do it. So what I've done was I got a couple of 2.5 ton big ratchet straps, jacked up the broken axle, compressed the spring, put the ratchet strap around the axle, and basically ratcheted it up to pull it, tuck it up. All right, release the jack. So when you release it, the ratchet strap is holding the axle up, and lo and behold, you can drive like this. All right, so I started driving, but because I had weight on the trailer, and the weight was enough to compress the working axle to a point wherein the tire was rubbing on the guards, then that sort of fix didn't work, right? So I stopped again and looked at it, and it started shredding the tire. I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? I got a piece of timber, jammed it in the middle of the broken axle and the chassis, and just zip tied the hell out of this thing so it doesn't move. So basically it was like a bump stop, and it was just holding this thing up, and I managed to drive over 100 kilometers like this. I'm going to finish off this video by saying this thing again. You cannot change the situation, but you can change the outcome. Remember that, and stick with it. Thanks for watching, guys. Drive safe, and I'll see you in the next video.